The village of Omuis had not seen a wedding this grand in years. The sun hung low and golden, casting warm shadows across the dancing compound. Drums pounded with rhythm, wine flowed freely, and rappers of every color swirled like butterflies. BY BORRAH, the village's most eligible bachelor, stood beaming in a regal burgundy agbada, the carved staff of his late father in hand. Beside him was Deceit, beautiful, proud, eyes glowing with victory. But hours before the wedding, under the canopy of a mango tree away from the noise, Deceit clutched BY BORRAH's hand tightly and said something that would mark the beginning of their tale. BY BORRAH, she whispered, I've loved you from the day I first saw you. But let me be clear. I didn't marry into your mother. I married you. BY BORRAH blinked, confused. What do you mean? He asked. I mean, she must never live with us. Ever. BY BORRAH hesitated, the smile from his face evaporating like morning dew. But Mama Ada raised me alone. Since Papa died, she's been my only parent. She'll want to stay after the wedding. Then she can stay in the village. This is not the 1800s. Deceit snapped. I won't have an old woman breathing down my neck, telling me how to cook or bathe my husband. BY BORRAH looked at her long and hard. But the drums were calling. The crowd was waiting. He nodded, and with that single nod, history began to write its pages. 3 days after the wedding, Mama Ada arrived with a small bag on her head and a smile that wore wisdom. New, she greeted at the doorstep, holding up a wrapped gift of ground spices. My daughter, this is for your first pot of soup as a married woman. Deceit didn't even open the screen door. She looked her over, from her tired eyes to the cracked soles of her feet. You should have sent a message before coming, Deceit said coldly. I wasn't expecting you. But this is my son's house, Mama Ada replied gently. I came to help you settle in. Help? Mama, I didn't ask for help, Deceit said sharply. I know how to run my own home. Thank you. BY BORRAH came out, tie loosened from work. Mama, you came. Yes, my son. I brought some ogairi and utazi from the village. I even brought the mortar your father used. She wants to live here, Deceit interrupted, crossing her arms. BY BORRAH looked between the two women. He rubbed his temples. Mama, maybe you should stay a few days and return home later. Mama Ada blinked, stunned but graceful. If it pleases you. She entered the house with a soft sigh, but from that day, she was treated like a stranger in her own son's home. Mama Ada spent her days quietly sitting in the backyard, pounding yam with patient arms and humming tunes from her childhood. One evening, she brought out her beloved clay pot, the same one she'd used since BY BORRAH was a boy, and placed it over the firewood in the outdoor kitchen. Deceit spotted it and scoffed. You're cooking in that thing. Yes, Mama Ada replied. Clay brings out the flavor. Flavor of dust and germs, maybe. Deceit laughed and wrinkled her nose. It has served this family for decades, Mama Ada said softly. Well, times have changed. The next morning, Mama Ada walked outside to find the pot missing. Frantically, she searched the compound. Behind the waste bin, she found it, smashed into pieces. My pot, she whispered, tears wetting her cheeks. BY BORRAH walked past, briefcase in hand. Obi, your wife broke my pot. Mama, maybe it was an accident. She said nothing. No apology. BY BORRAH exhaled. Let's just let it go. Mama Ada said nothing more. She simply picked up the fragments and wrapped them in a scarf like a body being buried. Days turned to weeks. The tension in the house thickened like palm oil left too long in the cold. BY BORRAH often came home late, lingering at the bar before dragging his tired feet back to a house split by silence. Deceit ran the home like a queen. Everything was marble, scented, imported. But her eyes never met Mama Ada's again. Your mother doesn't like me, she said to BY BORRAH one night as they lay in bed. You haven't given her a reason to, he muttered. Excuse me. Deceit, you smashed her pot. You insult her in front of people. You barely greet her. She's always looking at me like she's better than me. She's just old. Then let her act like it, or she can leave. Obayora turned to face the wall, unwilling to argue. Mama Ada heard everything from the corridor. Her room was next to theirs. The pain echoed in her chest like thunder against bamboo. That night, she didn't sleep. That night, she made a decision. The Umui's elders had invited Obayora and Ndidi to a chieftaincy celebration. Mama Ada, known in the village as Mother of Peace, accompanied them quietly. In the gathering square, palm wine flowed and laughter echoed. Mama Ada tried to sit beside Ndidi on the family mat, but Ndidi stood up immediately and walked to the far end. "Don't put that wrapper near mine," she said loudly. People looked. "She came uninvited," Ndidi added, sipping from her calabash. "Why is she always following us like a shadow?" Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through dry grass. "Isn't that her mother-in-law? Did she just call her a shadow?" Mama Ada slowly stood, her eyes glassy. "I only came to bless the moment," she said gently, "not to be insulted." "Then bless it from your own home," Ndidi snapped. Obayora sat frozen. He didn't speak. His silence was louder than a scream. Mama Ada placed her wrapper back in her bag and walked away from the celebration barefoot. The drums played on, but the rhythm had changed. The moon that night was thin, like a sliver of judgment hanging over the compound. The air was heavy with the smell of roasted yam and something unspoken. Inside, the house that should have held warmth felt like a stage where everyone played their part badly. Mama Ada had not slept. She had risen before dawn, quietly swept the compound, the way she always did, hands moving with the rhythm of generations. She prepared Gary for breakfast, wrapped a small bundle of herbs, and packed the few things she owned. Her walking stick leaned against the wall, worn smooth from years of use. In the dim hallway, she saw Ndidi's silhouette slip past, whispering with Obayora about a new purchase, imported cloth from the city, the kind that cost more than entire harvests. Mama Ada walked outside to the front of the house. She sat on the low stool where she once used to braid Obayora's hair when he was a boy. Her fingers traced the carved patterns on the wood, remembering laughter that had since turned to silence. She didn't say a word. She folded her wrapper with care, tied the bundle to the small sack, and slipped out through the back gate before anyone heard the soft thud of her sandals on the dusty path. The morning rooster crowed. Ndidi came out with a fresh cup of palm wine, saw the empty room, and smiled to herself. "Finally," she murmured. "No more old tales. No more interference." Obayora arrived later, calling her name, and went to Mama Ada's room. The bed was made neatly. Her few belongings were gone. He called, "Mama Ada." His voice echoed, "Too late." He went outside and saw footprints fading into the dust leading toward the main road. He ran after them, breath short, but the footprints stopped where the path bent toward the grove, the place where Mama Ada had once gone to pray for his safety during droughts. He stood there, chest tight. Back at the house, Ndidi was humming, arranging new cushions. That night, Obayora sat by the fire, silence weighing like a heavy wrapper. He stared at the place where his mother used to sit, wondering when the warmth left. He found Ndidi in the courtyard, polishing cutlery. "She's gone," he said slowly. "Good," Ndidi replied without looking up. "Now the house can breathe." "Did you say anything to make her leave?" "I said what needed saying. She was old, stuck in her ways. You were weak, letting her run your life." Obayora looked away, the taste of regret bitter in his mouth. Mama Ada walked 3 villages away. She didn't announce herself. She found a small hut owned by an old friend, tucked away near the river, where the water sang low lullabies. She sat with her back against the wall, wrapped in silence, and watched as days passed. She remembered the day Obayora was born, how she had promised him a life of peace. She clenched her fists, not in rage, but in a quiet resolve that the story was not yet finished. 2 years became 3. Ndidi's laughter in the home grew louder. Her clothes more luxurious, her hair more polished, her voice sharper when she spoke to anyone who came near. She hosted feasts, threw parties, made sure everyone knew she was Obayora's wife. Proud, unrivaled, untouchable. But beneath the surface of her carefully curated life was a hollow that grew wider with each passing season. She had everything the market could sell and more. Yet when a woman friend, Amaka, visited with a tray of kola nuts, she asked gently, "Ndidi, when are you going to give Obayora a child? The ancestors will be pleased when the lineage continues." Ndidi's smile flickered. "Why do you assume I'm not already pregnant?" "Because you're not showing. And you've been married 4 years. People are talking." "Let them talk," she snapped. "I do not owe anyone a child." But in quiet moments, in the coolness of her bedroom when the fans whirred and the night felt like a heavy cloth, she touched her abdomen. Her fingers trembled, not from pain, but from the weight of expectation, her own and the unspoken pressure of family legacy. She whispered into the dark, "It's not my fault." Meanwhile, in distant gatherings, in the market squares where women sold peppers and men bartered goats, whispers began to grow like weeds. Ndidi's womb is silent. The one who chased away the mother-in-law is the same one the gods are ignoring. Karma begins small, it swells. Obayora heard the whispers but did not speak of them. He changed the subject when friends brought it up. He blamed the empty place in his home on destiny, on medicine men, on stress. Yet sometimes, when he watched Ndidi stare into space, weary beneath her layers of makeup and silk, he caught the lines of worry carved lightly around her eyes. One afternoon, as rain pelted the roof and the compound smelled of wet earth, Ndidi sat by the window and watched little frogs hop across the mud. She saw a mother frog with eggs, guarding them fiercely. She turned to Obayora when he came in, rain-soaked, and said with quiet venom, "Do you ever think my barrenness is because of her?" She blessed her own absence by leaving. Obayora closed his eyes. "Maybe," he said softly, "but a child needs more than just birth. It needs peace to grow." "Then give me peace. Remove the echoes of the past. I married you, not your history." He walked away. The years pushed forward like a pressed drum. Ndidi's pride grew heavier. The silence in her belly became a ghost she kept lighting expensive candles to appease, while the old women at the market muttered beneath their breath that no amount of sacrifice could chase the roots of her own cruelty. It was the dry season when the prophet came. He arrived with no fanfare, riding a worn bicycle with a basket full of dried leaves and a small brass bell tied to the handlebar. The villagers knew him, Prophet Ease, who spoke in riddles and sometimes in truths that cut like knives wrapped in velvet. He asked to be brought to Obayora's compound. Ndidi was at the veranda, sipping sweetened zobo, when the prophet appeared, barefoot, his robe stained from travel. "I heard a house that once held peace is now a territory of silence," he said, not greeting them formally. His eyes went straight to Ndidi. "You are the queen here, but you sit on a throne built on broken pieces." Ndidi bristled. "Who are you to come into my home and speak like that?" "I am a messenger," he replied calmly. "The womb is a vessel. It listens to spirits and remembers how it was treated. The woman whose presence you cut off still walks in the corridors of your fate." Obayora stepped forward, confused. "Prophet, please, we have no quarrel. You are welcome to the palm wine." "Quarrel isn't always loud," the prophet said. "Some are quiet. They move like wind. Ndidi, the child you want to carry is waiting at a door you closed. The door will not open because you slammed it shut yourself." "So you say the mother-in-law is to blame? That she cursed me from a distance?" Ndidi spat, voice rising. The prophet shook his head. "She is not he to curse. She stepped back, neither to punish nor to leave. She stepped back to teach. Your womb listens more to what you do than what you say. Pride is heavy. It sits on the belly and presses down. Change the tone, and the door might creak open. Until then, the silence will remain a mirror of your own heart." He turned to Obayora. You carry the weight of two women. One you pushed aside with a nod. The other you refused to defend. If you want peace, speak. If you want legacy, act. Otherwise, the roots will wither while the tree keeps pretending it has leaves. He left as quietly as he came, the brass bell jingling softly down the path. And Diddy never slept that night. The words of the prophet crawled like ants beneath her skin. She walked to the backyard, picked up the broken clay pot fragments Mama Ada had kept wrapped in her old scarf, kept and hidden still from when she had come to beg for forgiveness. But Ndidi's pride didn't allow that meeting, and placed them under the new decorative fountain in the courtyard. Let the water carry the past away, she muttered to herself. Obayora found her there. Did he say something to you? He asked. He said I'm the problem, she said, voice thin. He said I have to change. Then start with your mother-in-law, Obayora said quietly. She didn't leave to disappear. She left because of you. Go find her. Find her? After what I did? Ndidi's laugh was hollow. You think she'll come back to this house of shame? No. Let her stay where she is. Let me have the peace I bought. He didn't argue. That evening, Obayora went to the small market and bought a kola nut, wrapped in a thin white cloth. He placed it on the small shrine at the edge of the compound, not for sacrifice, but as a gesture. The villagers saw him. Some nodded. Others shook their heads. The market had always been the village's heartbeat. It was where secrets went to be dressed in gossip, where truths wore veils to survive. That week, the whispers were a low murmur that swelled with every trade. She drove away her mother-in-law and now begs the spirits for what she lost. The child she wants is asking why she hasn't been invited. Obayora is quiet. He used to laugh like thunder. Now his laugh breaks like dry bark. Amaka, who sold pepper and ground nuts, saw Ndidi's cousin, Ifema, coming with a basket of yam. She pulled her close. I heard she's seeing the prophet's words in her dreams. I heard the prophet said her wound listens to what she did to the one who gave her peace, Ifema replied. She doesn't care, Amaka said. She's too busy buying new wrappers and throwing feasts. She thinks gold hides rot. Word got to Obayora through the softest of channels. He sat away from the crowd, pretending to taste palm wine, and listened. He saw the way the young boys mimicked Ndidi's sharp tone when they played house in the dust. He heard the older women shaking their heads when she passed. He began to carry a silence that felt like a wound. He walked by Mama Ada's old room and stood there longer than usual. One day, an old friend, Chief Okeke, approached him. Son, the village is talking. Not about your wealth, but about the silence in your home. A man's house is not measured by his clothes alone. It's measured by who comes when the storm arrives. What storm? Obayora asked. The one you refuse to see. Ndidi has power, yes. But power without humility fades. You let her choose the path. Now the path is closing for her, and for you. Obayora swallowed. He went home, and Ndidi was the mirror, arranging her head tie. She caught his glance. They talk, she said, as if it was a warning. They talk because you stopped listening, he replied softly. She turned, eyes narrow. You're on their side now. I'm on the side of peace, he said. She looked away, hardening. Ndidi began to dream. In the dream, she stood by the river she had once taken for granted, the river where Mama Ada had taught her to wash yams and the children to swim. But the water that day was still. On its bank sat Mama Ada, her back turned, wrapped in a white wrapper that glowed faintly. Her hair was tied simply. She didn't look at Ndidi. A cool wind blew and carried voices, voices of women, past generations whispering. Ndidi, one voice said, but no sound formed. Ndidi reached out. Mama! Mama Ada didn't move. The river began to rise, wrapping around Ndidi's ankles, then knees, then waist. She struggled. The more she cried out, the more the water pulled her in, cold, heavy, yet silent like her own guilt. She woke gasping, sweat soaking through the sheets. Her heart pounded like a war drum. She touched her stomach. Blood, the faintest trace, stained the edge of her wrapper. She ran outside, breath short, and fell to her knees by the same courtyard where the prophet had stood. She grabbed the carved stool and kissed it. "What do you want from me?" she whispered to the night. The next morning, she went to the river. The water looked different, cleaner, deeper. She sat and dipped her fingers in. The ripple formed a pattern, a cycle broken and then restored. She went home and didn't speak much. BY BORRAH noticed her unease. "The dream again?" he asked. She didn't look at me, Deceit said quietly. She sat with her back turned. "I heard the women, BY BORRAH. I heard them say if you don't mend what's broken, even the blessing will twist." "You still have time," he said, "but the window closes with each day you ignore the past." She stared into the distance, the weight of the dream pressing like a thick cloth. Word traveled again. The old women said she had seen the ancestral warning, the river that reflected truth. Some said the gods were speaking through her night visions. Others whispered that dreams were tricks to soften her for a comeback. Deceit stopped sleeping soundly. She began to sense a presence, like someone watching from the edge of her life. But every time she turned to look, there was only empty air. And somewhere, far away, Mama Ada sat under the shade of a neem tree, her eyes closed, feeling the tremor of Diddy's dream ripple through the earth, quietly, without malice, as if the world were reminding itself that balance had not yet tipped fully. For years of silence, of candles lit and prayers muttered beneath breath, of expensive herbs bought from town, of hushed conversations behind closed doors, finally, the house smelled differently. Diddy's cheekbones, which had been sharp with worry, softened with something close to hope. When the morning she realized came, she had been sitting by the window, watching a mother sparrow feed her chicks. The small birds chirped in rhythm, their tiny beaks opening and closing with trust. Deceit placed her palm over her stomach and felt nothing. Then, a faint flutter, like the whisper of wings, stirred under her skin. She didn't tell anyone for days. She watched the way her body changed, the way her appetite twisted, the weight of it curling softly. BY BORRAH noticed her moving differently, how her eyes held secret light. He came to her one evening while Deceit was kneading dough, flour dusting her hands like powdered moonlight. "You look different," he said. She paused, placing her palm delicately over the dough as if afraid to break the moment. "Maybe I am," she replied, voice measured. She finally went to the medicine woman in a neighboring village, one who did not speak in riddles but in quiet assuredness. After the herbs were mixed and the leaves laid, the old woman closed her eyes, placed 2 fingers gently on Decei's wrist. "Child," she whispered, "the silence has broken." Deceit left with the mixture wrapped in clean cloth. That night, she placed the small bundle on the altar, lit beeswax candles, and spoke to the empty air like a mother speaking to a child she had imagined for years. "You will be fine," she whispered. "You will be mine. I won't share you with the past." Word traveled again. Even the gossiping tongues that had grown sharp softened a little. Some came to offer congratulations out of genuine relief. Others came to hide their incredulous looks behind folded wrappers. Mama Ada heard too, through the wind, through old friends, through the ache in her chest that had become a slow companion. She didn't rejoice openly. Instead, she prayed quietly by the river, not for Decei's fame or for the child, but for a healed heart in a house that had once been hers. She had no idea the child's arrival would warp the direction of everything to come. BY BORRAH, upon hearing, felt something loosen inside him, a mix of joy and a shadow of guilt. He bought new clothes, ordered yams and fresh goat meat, and told the village to prepare small gifts. He looked at Deceit with a tenderness that had been buried beneath years of silence, but whenever he tried to bridge the widening gap, she smiled politely and pulled away, her own pride still a thin membrane between them. She kept her distance from Mama Ada's name. When people mentioned her, Decei's jaw tightened, but she controlled her face like a queen keeping her cot's unrest from showing. The rains had come earlier than expected that year. The sky broke open in a violent crash, and the wind rattled the windows like fingers knocking on the door of destiny. It was a stormy night. Thunder rolled over the compound in long, low moans, and the rain hammered the corrugated roof like a drumbeat of urgency. Ndidi felt at first as a tremor, a trickle that surprised her. She was alone. BY BORRAH had gone to a neighboring town on matters of trade, promising to return before the next full moon. The time had not yet come, she thought. She went to the chamber, lit incense, and lay on the mattress, trying to breathe through the rhythm of the storm. Then the pain came, sharp, like knives wrapped in fire. Her water broke with a sound that echoed in the empty rooms. She screamed. The first scream startled the rats in the rafters. The second shook the rafters themselves. She got up, staggering, grabbing the frame of the bed. Blood stained the white wrapper she had wrapped around her, then spread like dark ink. She ran to the front door, pounding it like a drum. Help! Somebody, help me! She ran to the neighbor's door, Auntie Ife's, a woman she had once invited for feasts but now barely spoke to. Rainwater plastered her head tie to her forehead. She knocked until her knuckles bled. No answer. She went to the next house, where the youth were playing cards, and banged on the door. Please, I'm in labor. They looked up, then away. The thunder masked everything. Ndidi heard their footsteps retreat, the slamming of shutters, muffled whispers. No one came. She stumbled back, the pain swallowing her breath. Her screams grew more desperate, deeper than any of the ones she had used to insult, to command, to dismiss. She crawled across the wet floor, finding the small wooden stool where Mama Ada used to sit. Her hands trembled as she clutched its edges, sobbing between contractions. Why won't anyone come? She cried into the empty compound. BY BORRAH! BY BORRAH! Where are you? The wind answered with a howl. The rain came harder. She rolled onto the woven mat. The pain was now a fire that devoured her from inside. She was alone in the space where family should have gathered. Her breath hitched. The clouds outside drew black curtains around her, and the house that had once been filled with laughter now seemed to lean away, indifferent. Time lost meaning. No sound can be louder than a person's own desperation when the world chooses silence. Ndidi's voice tore through the night, ragged and raw. Her limbs flailed. Her body shook. Her cries were pleas and accusations all in one. She remembered every insult she had thrown like spears, how they had sunk into Mama Ada's silence, into BY BORRAH's retreat. Each one now echoed back, a chorus that filled her skull. She shouted the names of those who had ignored her. I fed you when you were hungry. I gave you place to sleep. Where is the help? Where is honor? Where is the daughter-in-law who promised respect? She clutched the doorframe, and the rain seeped in, soaking her and the floor. The compound was still. The torches outside sputtered from the wind. Crickets, who had once serenaded the night, were silent, as if the village itself held its breath. Her body convulsed again, and she screamed not just from labor but from the betrayal of her own expectations. In the heat of pain, she saw in her mind's eye the faces of the villagers, laughing, whispering, and then turning away. She sobbed into the damp floor, the sound merging with thunder. Somewhere, far across the path, a little boy, who had once imitated her sharp insults while playing with sticks, flipped over his toy and whispered to his mother, Mama, why is Ndidi crying like that? The mother shushed him, pulling him in, eyes down. Ndidi's vision blurred. She felt herself slipping, a thin thread between oblivion and survival. She screamed again, for the child in her, for herself, for the support she had never sought until now. The storm raged on. Just as the edges of her world began to soften into nothingness, the sound of slow footsteps creaked from the threshold. The storm's clamor faded into a muffled hush. It was as if the rain itself leaned in. An old woman stood at the doorway. She carried no grand tools, no loud proclamations, just a small satchel slung over her shoulder and a walking stick carved with symbols of age and history. Her eyes were deep wells of calm. Her wrapper was plain, but somehow it glowed in the dim light. Ndidi's lips formed a soundless question, her body weak and ripped open by pain. "Who are you?" she whispered, voice thin like a broken reed. The woman stepped in slowly, her presence anchoring the room. She didn't look like anyone from the village. Her accent carried traces of places beyond the hills, and her gait was steady even in the storm's tremble. "I am here for the child," she said simply, "and for the mother who forgot how to ask." Ndidi's brain tried to catch up. She bared her teeth. "I didn't call you. Where is my midwife? Where is—" The woman didn't flinch. "Names do not bring progress. Will you push, or will you keep pushing and lose both of you?" Ndidi's body convulsed. The woman placed her weathered hand gently over Ndidi's. There was warmth, not of heat, but of gravity. The pain shifted, not lessened, but contained. A rhythm entered, a cadence that guided the birth like a subtle wind guiding a fallen leaf to safety. "Breathe," the old woman instructed. "Push when the river calls. Trust the pulse. Your child is stubborn because you are stubborn. Let them both breathe." Ndidi obeyed like one who had no choice left but survival. The old woman's words were medicine without a bottle. Minutes stretched like hours. Then came another wave, and then the sound. A cry. A sharp, raw sound that cut through the storm like sunlight through a crack. The old woman lifted the child. Wrapped in a simple cloth, the baby's skin was the rich color of fertile earth. Ndidi's eyes filled with a mix of awe and brokenness. "It is a boy," the woman said. Ndidi tried to reach, but her strength failed. The woman placed the baby gently on Ndidi's chest. The boy's tiny fingers curled around her skin. Silence settled, not the cold absence of before, but a heavy breath of transition. "You did not let the past die," the woman continued, eyes looking past Ndidi. "You only buried it. Now you have a chance to dig it back up and plant new seeds." "Who are you?" Ndidi repeated, quieter. The woman's face shifted, so briefly that Ndidi thought it a trick of rain. Her lips curled into a sad smile. "One who knows what a mother-in-law can teach. Remember, one day you will sit where she sat today. Learn." She turned to leave. Ndidi tried to call her back. "Wait. What is your name? I owe you." The woman had already stepped outside. The rain had paused in a still breath. She looked back once. Her eyes softened. Carry the child. Carry the lesson. Then she was gone into the night. No footprints. No sound. Just the echo of a presence that felt like a warning wrapped in mercy. Word spread quickly in Umui's, though this was not the story anyone expected. Ndidi lay in her bed, the child asleep against her heartbeat. The storm had passed. The compound smelled of wet earth and firewood. Her breaths were ragged, each one a small victory. Obayora returned that morning, drenched and breathless, expecting the usual calm. He stopped dead at the threshold when he saw the small crowd outside, whispers, glances, the furtive looks that signaled something had shifted. "What happened?" he asked, rushing in. Ndidi looked up at him. Her eyes were red from pain, but there was a softness, fragile as new cloth. "He's here," she said simply. He stepped closer and saw the baby, his son, laid on her chest. He sagged, hands trembling, and then broke into tears, a mixture of joy, regret, and something that felt like apology. The elders came, not to celebrate. They came with their faces folded in judgment. The naming ceremony was quiet, but the news traveled. She gave birth alone. The woman she chased away was missing. No one came when she cried. Auntie Ife, who had once ignored the knocking, stood at the edge of the compound, her eyes downcast. She had heard something the night before, an old woman's staff creaking, a whisper of prophecy, but said nothing. The baby's first cry echoed again, and the old woman's words replayed in Ndidi's mind. "One day you too will be mother-in-law. Learn." When Obayora asked about the midwife, Ndidi could not give him a name. "She came out of the rain," Ndidi whispered. "She didn't ask for money. She said I needed to remember." Obayora's mouth opened, closed, opened again. You were alone. I was not alone, Ndidi said, touching the child's tiny foot. Something came when the world turned away. The elders whispered among themselves. Some muttered about spirits, others about signs. Someone suggested a cleansing for the child. Others said the child was a message. Mama Ada, hearing the news from a distant neighbor, did not come. She sat under her neem tree, cradling her own memories, and whispered into the wind. May the child live with peace. Years later, when the story spread and tongues tried to explain what had happened, they would say the child came as a mirror, born into the womb of arrogance but delivered by the mercy of a mysterious midwife who carried both warning and blessing. Ndidi held her son. For the first time, she touched her own heart and felt the small crack that had been growing widen, just enough to let in a sliver of something she had not felt in years, humility. When Obayora returned with the son he never believed would come, the village buzzed like a kettle about to boil, but the steam carried a bitter tang. The story had already stretched its fingers into every A, and Ndidi gave birth alone. No one came. The mother-in-law she chased away was gone. She screamed and the compound stayed silent. Ndidi lay in bed, the baby swaddled against her chest. Her body ached not only from labor but from the weight of being seen, not as the perfect wife she had envisioned, but as a woman exposed. The silk wrappers could not soften the raw edges of her reputation. Each visitor that came did so with a distance, the way one approaches a cracked pot, careful, unwilling to touch too hard. Obayora tried to cover the silence with gifts. He bought kola nuts, cowries, new cloth. He went to the elders, seeking their nod. He softened his voice when he spoke to Ndidi, but his eyes held a sadness that had the sharpness of a blade. The elders visited, not to celebrate the miracle, but to analyze the display of shame. They praised the child's survival with subdued voice, then leaned close and, in low tones, reminded Ndidi about her place, as if the pain of giving birth alone was a penance and the baby a reward that came with strings. You should have honored your elders, one elder muttered, especially the one who raised the man you married. Respect yields peace. Disrespect draws solitude. The women in the compound who had once whispered about Ndidi's power now whispered about her fall. They used the same tones. They were sharper, older, more seasoned. Her guests no longer laughed freely. They lowered their heads and kept the stories light, afraid of being tangled in the same web of shame. Ndidi watched Obayora with a look that had begun to shift. She saw the way he stayed silent when people talked about how she had given birth. Not that she had. She saw his guilt that swelled into quiet distance. The child, her son, cried often, tiny fists punching the air as if searching for the warmth of a mother who had no defense left. One evening, when the sun was low and the village had settled into its habitual rhythms, Ndidi asked for a small calabash of water. She slid from bed with effort, wrapped her wrapper loosely, and went to the little courtyard where Mama Ada's old stool stood like a memorial. She sat, and for the first time in years, her hands trembled, not from anger, but from something like regret. She took the fragmented clay pot she had once hidden under the fountain and brought it out. She cradled the pieces like a child. I thought breaking you would give me peace, she whispered to the wind. I thought pushing her away would clear the path. But the path became empty. I have a son, and I hear no song for him. I feel no welcome for myself. She lifted her face to the sky. The wind did not answer. The silence felt like a mirror, reflecting a woman whose choices had come home heavier than the richest wrapper. Obayora found her there and stood, watching her from the threshold. She left, he said softly, because you made her feel unwelcome. I stayed quiet because of fear. We both failed. Ndidi looked up, surprised by the honesty. It was the first time he had named their shared failure without deflecting. What do I do now? She asked, voice cracked. You start with asking, he said. The rest might come. She held the child to her chest and didn't respond. The silence between them no longer felt like armor. It felt like an open wound that could either fester or heal, depending on how they moved. The day of the naming ceremony arrived with the kind of hush that presses against ears. And Diddy had prepared as if to perform a ritual that would bury the past, new wrappers, colorful beads, a meal to feed the village. She sent invitations, not to boast, but to plead. Some, out of obligation, came. Others stayed away. The space that usually throbbed with drums and dancers was quiet. The drummer who had once played for every major celebration in BY BORRAH's family refused to drum. He placed his sticks down and gave the excuse of firewood to fetch. The elders arrived, but they stood on the edges, moving their lips in measured prayers while their eyes surveyed the compound like judges. No one came with the cheer of old. No children ran with laughter. The family dancers were missing, their absence louder than any sound. And Diddy had imagined that the birth of a son would pull the village together, that this child would be a bridge over the chasm. Instead, the naming ceremony felt like an echo, a ritual performed in front of ghosts. BY BORRAH stood beside her, the infant wrapped in a white cloth, his arms folded as if trying to shelter something fragile from more judgment. And Diddy's mother-in-law's chair sat empty, covered with a cloth. And Diddy placed a small bowl of cola nut on it, the motion an awkward apology without words. The priest began. He gave the child a name with weight, a name that carried hope. The ceremony finished with the smallest of claps. People left quickly. Some whispered about karma. Others said the child had come to test Diddy's heart. After the guests left, Diddy sat alone with her son and watched BY BORRAH walk away. He stood at the gate, hands behind his back, looking at the village with a sad face, then slowly disappeared into the market. She whispered to her child, "You are the hope I didn't know I had. I failed the ones who could have helped us. I will try." But the promise sat next to the fear. She had not yet figured out the price of asking. She had made humility feel like surrender. Now she was being forced to taste it. Shame is loud. Regret is heavier. And humility, true humility, is a road one must walk alone. And Diddy could not sleep. Each night, she held her son, watched his light breaths, and the quiet rhythm of his life beat against her chest like a second chance. She wrote and tore up letters to Mama Ada. She practiced words in front of a cracked mirror. Pride had built a wall so tall she thought it impossible to climb, but the child's small hand curling around her finger cracked the mortar. She approached BY BORRAH one morning while the sun was still soft. "I need to go see her," she said. BY BORRAH blinked. "Mama Ada." "Yes, I will go. I will beg. I will." Her voice broke. "I will kneel if I must." He hesitated. "You think she'll come back just because you ask?" "I don't know," she replied. "But I need her blessing. Not for the child alone. For me. I need to be seen, truly seen, for what I've done. I can't keep holding the boy and pretending I didn't break the house." He said nothing more. He fetched a small clay pot, filled it with water, added cola nuts, and gave it to her. "Take this," he said. "It was hers before it was ours. Let it be the first thing you retain." She set off before noon, carrying the infant wrapped close, the clay pot balanced carefully on her head. The journey was not long by distance, but each step felt like taking responsibility for stones she had once thrown. She passed villagers who stayed. Some turned their faces away. Others watched her walk with the slow nod of acknowledgement, like a person who had seen a falling tree finally begin to be planted again. The path led to the small hut near the river where Mama Ada had made her quiet home. Diddy's heart hammered like a drum. She hesitated at the gate, lowered her eyes, then stepped forward. She knelt in the dirt, the earth cool beneath her knees. She whispered, voice soft and trembling, "Mama Ada, I came to say I was wrong. I came to ask for your forgiveness. I came to ask you to bless my son, not because I deserve it, but because I want to stop walking broken." The door creaked. Mama Ada appeared, the same old woman with the same calm eyes, but her face held lines that spoke of watching a storm from a distance and waiting for the soil to settle. "And Diddy," she said. The name didn't carry warmth, but it didn't carry the cold that had been there before either. "I have nothing grand to give. I have only this. And Diddy placed the clay pot gently at Mama Ada's feet, then opened her arms and held the infant for a second, not pushing him forward, not demanding, just letting him be seen. You came, Mama Ada said. I came to beg. I came to say I broke what should not have been broken. I chased you away with my pride. I thought pushing you out would give me legacy. I was wrong. I am sorry. I want to be better. Please, bless him. Bless my son. I don't want my house to keep echoing with emptiness. Mama Ada studied her. There was a long pause, a silence filled with all the years of unspoken words. You drove me from a home built by ancestors, but you carried the child from that brokenness. The child's cry carried both the echo of a wound and the sound of a new beginning. She looked at the baby, then back at Ndidi. You have taken the first step. The rest is slow work. Ndidi's shoulders relaxed slightly, a tear slipping down her cheek. What do I do? You treat the child's mother as you would have wished your own mother-in-law treated you. You learn. You don't pretend. You show. She lifted the child, holding him as if he were a continuation of the same breath. I will, Ndidi whispered. I will not waste what was given. Mama Ada did not rise with fireworks. Forgiveness came like dawn, slow, inevitable, softening edges. She beckoned Ndidi inside. The hut smelled of herbs, damp earth, and the lingering warmth of old prayers. They sat on woven mats. Ndidi's son slept against Ndidi's chest, his tiny hands moving in dreams. Mama Ada pulled out a small bundle of cloth and wrapped it around the baby's tiny wrist, an old charm, not for magic, but for remembrance. It was a reminder of origin, of lineage, of the balance between suffering and mercy. The child is yours, Mama Ada said, but the story of how you got him is not yours alone. It belongs to the house. You will carry the lesson, and you will teach others so they don't break what you broke. Ndidi nodded, feeling both light and heavy. She spoke then, words she had not thought she could say. Mama Ada, I forgot something important. I forgot that a home lives because of more than two people. I forgot that respect is not weakness, that humility is not defeat. I thought holding power meant pushing others down. I was wrong. Mama Ada placed her hand over Ndidi's. Then begin there, she said. The one who walks humbly is the one who lasts. Do not make the mistake of thinking strength is only in the loud voice. Sometimes strength is in the quiet offering of apology when the world expects you to defend your pride. Ndidi stayed for days. She learned to cook meals the old way, not to impress, but to understand. She listened when Mama Ada told stories of the village, of BY BORRAH as a boy, of the times when kindness made a home more precious than any golden wrapper. When she left, it was lighter, carrying the subtle weight of a promise renewed. Years passed. The child grew, tall enough to run with boys in the village square, thoughtful enough to ask questions about the woman who once sat alone in the compound and the woman who had forgiven the one who pushed her away. Ndidi had changed. It was not perfect. She still had moments where old habits crept like tiny weeds. But she now named them when they came, pulled them out, and replanted herself. Mama Ada returned to the compound, not as a shadow, but as a presence. She sat in the place of honor during festivals, her cane polished, her voice calm. Ndidi greeted her with a bow, not a forced one, but one that came from the marrow of learning. The boy, now a young child, grew under two kinds of love, the stain, wise shade of Mama Ada, and the softer, newly humbled devotion of Ndidi. He watched how his mother listened when his grandmother spoke. He watched how Ndidi intervened when he saw pride beginning to swell in others, teaching him that legacy was not inherited by force, but earned and extended through kindness. One afternoon, years later, a young woman came to the compound, her steps hesitant. She was to marry Ndidi's son. She carried her own fear, the same one Ndidi had once carried about a mother-in-law. Ndidi welcomed her gently. She sat her beside Mama Ada. Listen, Ndidi said, to what I once forgot. The woman who raised your husband may test you, not to break you, but to teach you. You will feel pride. Let it soften before it hardens into harm. Love her. And when it is your turn, remember the circle. You will be mother-in-law. Choose to give what was given to you. Mama Ada placed her hand over the young woman's, adding her own blessing, one not given out of obligation, but because time had turned the wound into wisdom. The cycle went on, not as repetition, but as evolution. And Diddy's story, once full of sharp edges, softened into a parable whispered on warm evenings when children played in the dust, a tale of a woman who drove her mother-in-law away, faced the darkest consequence alone, and walked back, humble, changed, and wise. The curse that had hung like a dark cloud over birth and silence dissolved into a legacy of learning. The village no longer spoke of the empty naming ceremony with mockery. They told the full story, how the silence became a mirror, how a child was born in storm and pain, how a journey to ask forgiveness healed a broken home, and how the circle completed not by erasing the past, but by folding it into a kinder future. The end.